Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Context is King. I'm Rebecca Brayton, and with me as always is Watchmojo founder and CEO Ashkan Karbasfrooshan to answer the question, does school matter? So, yes, no, maybe?
It depends. You know, I like the answer, it depends. You know, school matters to people who don't necessarily have either or, the drive, the initiative, the idea, the discipline. I think school then becomes like training, batting practice. You need it because without it, you're going to be lost. I remember vividly being in school and caring about the topics because I like business. I would follow business, read Business Week, Fortune, the way people follow sports, and I also like sports and music and many other things. But I could clearly see that there were like two buckets of students. There was those who kind of seemed a bit into it and kind of were like, I'm going to pursue this, I'm going to, give it a shot. And those who were like, even in college, which is expensive to be in, like too cool for school. And even when I go back, even when I was like lecturing as a TA and then when I go back to speak, it's clear that you have two types of profiles. Those who couldn't care and those who are really into it, and you see their eyes and they really are into the stories, and you could tell they're eager to get out there. So if you are, historically even, someone who had that inner drive, inner desire, you're almost impatient and you couldn't wait to get out there in the real world, I don't actually think school's important unless you're like want to be a doctor, or unless you need something like that.
Or you're the person sifting through all the resumes and need some way to weed them out.
True. Yeah, and even that's also back in the day. I feel like what's happened, and one of the reasons why I decided to launch Context when we did was, entrepreneurship is infringed. Like 30 years ago, you still wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor to please your parents. Then it was like, I'll be a hedge fund manager, an investment banker, a private equity guy, because that's what the money was in. Now, a lot of people, they think it's for the money, and then there's a rude awakening, but a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs. So I think if you were to really look at, in the context of entrepreneurship, we're not talking about do you need a degree to go become a doctor, but in the context of like, I want to work in business and I want to be either an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur or to join a startup. And that's when I speak to students now, those are my three questions. I go like, because they're business students, so I go, who wants to start a business? Who wants to go work at a startup? And who wants to work at a traditional corporation? The key is, if you are really into it, you probably don't need a degree. But if you're still not there and you're kind of
even for like business stuff? Because to me, and because I'm not a business person and I'm obviously not a doctor, but I would need tons of school to be proficient enough in business to be a business person.
But here's the thing. I was in school and I would read a lot about what businesses were doing and like what execs would trip up and when they would succeed, and I could see what the decisions were because like some dude in Fortune would write about it. That helped me a lot more. Like when the teacher was like giving a scenario about Coca-Cola and I'm like, oh yeah, and then they did this and that, I could see now why the teacher was kind of annoyed / intimidated because he was like, why does this guy know what happened outside of this textbook? The textbook was helpful. In no way did school harm me. But if I had to be really, really honest, all of that stuff that I read about every company and what they did, and that's what really helped me. And then like there's certain traits like wanting to serve and being helpful and being a problem solver. I don't really think that like school helped me become a great problem solver. I don't think they gave me my determination. I think what they taught me was, working in a team. Some people are slower, some people aren't as motivated as you, some people are probably not even, they don't even necessarily care about advancing. It's a job, so how do you motivate them? Like it was the stuff that school taught me had very little to do with what was actually in the textbook.
It was just social interactions.
Yeah, like social professional interactions. And then the other thing was like things, again, being very driven was just not to be so ambitious to the point of pissing off people because you need an army to go and, it's like if you want to go somewhere quick, go by yourself. If you want to go far, you need people to go with. So that is, I think, what school teaches you. Now, there's been this paradigm shift where back in the day, Google would buy your company, and then they would say, okay, we bought you, but now everybody gets in line. We're going to ask you what school you went to. And you're like, I don't get it. I sold my business to you. Or you bought my business, or you bought my team. Don't you want to buy them? Don't you want to integrate them all? And they're like, no, if you only went to Harvard, Yale, and 10 others. And I was like shocked about that.
But their parents probably bought their way in.
There you go. There you go. Full house. But so even
no, but seriously, that does devalue the value of
part of it. Yeah, absolutely. But it's also because like I ended up. So a little story. I wanted to go to McGill, and I got into McGill, but I had 172, and you needed 75 in all your math classes. So when I opened my acceptance, it was like, welcome, you've been admitted to the Bachelor of Arts. And I was like, yay. And I was like, wait a second, I applied to management. And then it was because I didn't have a 72. So I ended up going to Concordia, the John Molson School of Business.
Did you go to McGill?
No, that's it. But so I made a decision, and like in the end, by the time I got there, Concordia's business school, John Molson School of Business, was the better business school because it was more practical. But that ultimately set forth a lot of things that led me to sit in this chair as an entrepreneur. One, you had a chip on your shoulder by not going to McGill. You wanted to just stuff it to them in the marketplace. Two, McGill.
It's like the, what is it? Let's compare it for somebody. It's like the Red Sox or the Yankees, or?
Not even, no, because now they're both
bad.
extremely, it's more like, it's not really the Michigan State, because it's not like Concordia was a state, but it's more like that, where you have, it's like Harvard, I mean, is it Harvard, Boston College? I don't even know.
I don't think it's that bad.
I will find, again, I promise, and I rarely do, I'll find a good analogy or a good article that explains it. But McGill was like one of the best known schools in the world.
It's an Ivy League school.
It's an Ivy League school. McGill's like Harvard. It's basically like going to Harvard. Maybe Berkeley, Stanford, maybe that, like the engineers would get it. But ultimately, what's changed now is that the Facebooks and the Apples and the Googles are recognizing that, hey, the people that went to Harvard and Yale, they're really, really good, but not at necessarily the kinds of problems that we face in this world. This world is so messed up. You know, there was no playbook that could have prepared you to solve today's problems. So one thing that
especially considering we both graduated before YouTube.
There you go.
Well,
there you
not
go.
quite, but yeah.
I did, definitely. I mean, when I graduated, I think Google was still like a project at Stanford. That tells you everything you need to know. But I feel like a lot of hiring execs now view entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship as really, really good, you know, kind of testing grounds for you to solve problems and create value.
I actually had the question, does school matter or do degrees matter? Because there's a difference. And
great point.
School,
it's a combination.
Teachability, right?
Yeah, it's discipline.
And in it, discipline. There's a lot of things that being able to get through school indicates about a person.
Okay, this isn't going to be popular because I'm the guy that for a decade stood in front.
I thought that's what this channel was.
There you go. Yeah, this is. I think we've already used a few choice words in other episodes we've shot today. We're way past that. So I was the guy who, with a finance degree, but like I like the humanities and all that. I liked it all. But I would stand in front of a lot of journalism students at a time when there were all these articles about how journalism was a worthless degree. And I was like, don't listen to that.
In those days.
But I was like, that's BS. I'm like, that's not true. All degrees teach you a framework, and journalism is no exception. Same thing with liberal arts. A lot of these things that it's easy. So
liberal arts is way valuable now.
Today, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Because it teaches you, well-rounded. I do not have a liberal arts degree to be
No,
fair.
but all degrees have, but I feel the challenge, and this is more like as a guy who wants to give everybody advice to get jobs ultimately and be valuable on the workforce, or also to launch their own businesses. There are way too many people who pursue a very small subset of fields. Journalism being one of those.
Yeah, that's the difference between a liberal degree and a journalism
not enough,
degree.
okay.
Like a journalism degree is basically a few years of networking. Because at least at Concordia, where I went and got a journalism degree, which is where you went, but all your teachers are working journalists. So, and presumably everybody that
But
you're
there are
going
no
to school.
jobs.
Well, that's
so
the thing.
That's the issue, right?
Well, you got to find one, and apparently.
Well, the thing is,
At a
we are
YouTube
also in
start.
this very unique market in Montreal, which is like a bilingual city where English media is not exactly this thriving, growing marketplace. If you had a journalism degree in New York City, as much as it might still be a journalism degree, I guarantee you there were probably more jobs. So but then there's more competition. But ultimately, it's a framework. I feel like when I look at a candidate, admittedly, I don't really even look at their college or their degree. And then that's why I always like to meet people, because it's more about, do they have it in them? Is there a culture fit? So fundamentally, I understand why Google no longer cares about degrees. It's a sign of the times.
I'm just going to end on a quote from Tom Goodwin on LinkedIn. He says, "I long for the day a 4-year degree at Stanford is a sign of a lack of creativity and need to make anything, and a sad need to conform to an old-fashioned view of what matters while limiting your experience." So, what do you guys think? Are you wasting your time at school? I don't think so, but that's a different thing. Let us know in the comments, and we will see you next time.